The purpose of this screencast video lecture is to introduce our discussion of indefiniteness doctrine. In order to make it easier to navigate, I've divided the lecture into three parts. This first part will focus on alternatives to the judicial enforcement of promises. Judicial approaches to the indefiniteness doctrine vary. As you read, many courts interpret contractual vagueness as a sign that the parties didn't intend to form an enforceable contract. And that's why I've located the topic here in our map of the course. The majority of decisions turn on the issue of contractual intent. Other courts chastise parties for poor drafting, and like Walker v. Keith say they must refuse to be imposed upon. And some courts apply the doctrine without saying clearly why vague obligations are a problem. But before we explore the complexity of indefiniteness doctrine, it's worth asking ourselves whether public enforcement of promises is really necessary at all. Could there be other reasons that people will perform? Is the threat of a lawsuit really necessary? Recall the auto parts manufacturing hypo in our readings. We assume that no customers will sue the manufacturer for failing to deliver the hot new rear spoilers because litigation costs are too high. What other forces might encourage someone to perform even if there's no chance of being sued for breach? Please pause the video now to think about this question. Write down as many influences as you can. Did you come up with a good list of forces? Here are some questions you might ask our auto parts manufacturer. First, will these customers buy from you again? You may lose money on this transaction, paying more for labor or shipping or materials, but a breach now will make your current customers consider taking their business elsewhere. So the rewards of repeat business can be a powerful incentive to absorb short-term losses in order to perform. Next, will the victims of your breach talk about you? A key asset of most businesses is their reputation. It's important to cultivate good customer relations in order to generate positive referrals and avoid damning complaints. Are you reliable and trustworthy may be the first question many customers ask themselves. Or what if you depend on your customers as much as they depend on you? Some business relationships require both parties to make substantial upfront investments in the relationship. If the relationship fails, both parties then lose the value of those investments. Economists call this an exchange of hostages, or far less colorfully, mutual relationship-specific investments. Suppose that there's a huge cluster of retail auto parts stores located on one street in a large city. If our manufacturer locates a plant in the middle of this area to serve their demand, that investment is tied to the retail stores. The manufacturer will want to protect that investment. The retailers can kill the manufacturer's hostage by switching their business to another company. Despite the colorful language, this is a perfectly legal form of self-help. The risk of losing its hostage will encourage the manufacturer to perform. Or what if your customer operates outside the law? If one of your retail store customers happens to be a gang front operation, think the photocopy shop in The Wire, you may also need to worry about illegal self-help, also known as arm breaking. In a world where might makes right, you may suffer violence for failing to fulfill your promises. Thankfully, this is a rare situation, and one that I don't expect you to encounter in practice. More subtly and more broadly relevant, we should ask, how does breaching make you feel? Most people, most of the time, feel regret about breaking a promise. We incur a psychic cost. The reason is that we have internalized moral norms about the importance of keeping our promises. When we violate these norms, it hurts. Thus, we try to avoid the pain by finding a way to fulfill our promise. Behavioral economists sometimes refer to this phenomenon as the self-sanction of internalized moral norms. Psychologists point out, however, that humans are also very good at self-serving deception. We can often tell ourselves a story that makes our conduct morally correct. You often see such self-serving bias in contractual disputes, as each party constructs a version of events that casts the other party as the villain. But you should never underestimate the potential power of a moral appeal to encourage contractual performance. So we have seen that forces other than legal enforcement deter breach and encourage parties to keep their promises. When should the law supplement these forces with judicial enforcement? Wouldn't it be nice to have a theory of when and why we will resort to public enforcement? That's the subject of part 2 of this screencast video lecture.